You were 8 years old, taking care of your siblings. 10 years old, managing the household because your parents couldn't. 12 years old, being the emotional support for adults who should have been supporting you. You weren't allowed to be a child. You were forced to be an adult before your brain was ready for it. And now, decades later, you're still living with the effects of that stolen childhood. You're hyper-responsible and exhausted, mature beyond your years, and emotionally stunted, capable of handling anything and unable to relax. You grew up too fast, and it marked you in ways you're only beginning to understand. Let me show you the traits you have from being forced to grow up too fast. Not to make you feel broken, to help you understand why you are the way you are. Because what happened to you in childhood is still happening to you now. Every single day. Trait 1. You're hyper-responsible to the point of self-destruction. You take on too much. You can't say no. You feel personally responsible for things that aren't your responsibility. And you exhaust yourself trying to manage, fix, and control everything around you. Because that's what you learned to do as a child. This is called parentification. And research shows it's one of the most damaging forms of childhood trauma. When children are forced into adult roles, they develop what's called compulsive caretaking. They can't not take care of things. It's not a choice. It's wiring. You were the adult when you should have been the child. So now, as an actual adult, you're still operating from that childhood program. Everyone else's needs come first. Everyone else's problems are yours to solve. You can't rest because there's always something that needs to be managed. Studies show that adults who were parentified as children have significantly higher rates of burnout, anxiety, and stress-related health issues. Not because they're weak, because they're running on a system designed for crisis mode that never got turned off. You're not lazy when you can't relax. You re-exhausted from decades of hyper-responsivity that started when you were too young to understand you didn't have to carry everything alone. Trait 2. You're extremely independent but terrified of actually needing anyone. You learned early that adults weren't reliable, that you couldn't depend on anyone, that asking for help was pointless or dangerous. So you became self-sufficient out of necessity. And now you can't accept help even when you desperately need it. Research on attachment shows that children forced into premature independence develop what's called compulsive They can't trust that others will show up. They can't believe that help is coming, so they do everything themselves, even when it's killing them. You're not strong because you handle everything alone. You're traumatized. You learned that needing people wasn't safe, that vulnerability got punished, that the only person you could count on was yourself, and that lesson is still controlling you. Studies show this leads to isolation, relationship difficulty, and inability to form secure attachments in adulthood. You want connection, but you can't trust it. You want support, but you can't accept it, because your childhood taught you that needing people ends in disappointment or harm. Trait 3. You feel guilty for doing anything that's just for you. Rest, pleasure, play, fun. All of it feels wrong. Selfish. Like you should be doing something productive instead. Because when you were a child, your needs didn't matter. Only everyone else's needs mattered, and that hierarchy is still operating. This is internalized self-neglect. Research shows that parentified children learn to see their own needs as less important than others' needs, and that belief persists into adulthood, creating chronic self-sacrifice and inability to prioritize self. You struggle to take breaks, to spend money on yourself, to do things purely because they bring you joy, because the child in you still believes that your needs are selfish, that taking care of yourself means you're failing to take care of everyone else. Studies show this leads to chronic exhaustion, resentment, and eventual collapse. You can't sustain a lifetime of putting yourself last, but you also can't stop because it's all you know. Trait 4. You're simultaneously emotionally mature and emotionally stunted. You can handle adult problems with incredible maturity, but you struggle with playfulness, spontaneity, vulnerability. The parts of emotional development that should have happened in childhood never did because you were too busy being the adult. Research on developmental trauma shows that parentified children often have what looks like advanced emotional intelligence in some areas and significant deficits in others. They can regulate others' emotions, but not their own. They can handle crises, but not intimacy. They can be the strong one, but not the vulnerable one. You know how to be needed. You don't know how to need. You know how to give support. You don't know how to receive it. You know how to be responsible. You don't know how to just be. Studies show this creates relationships where you're always the caretaker, never the one being cared for. Where you're always the strong one, never the one who gets to fall apart, because you never learned that you're allowed to be the one who needs support. Trait 5. You have a deep fear of being a burden. Even when you're struggling, you don't reach out. You minimize your problems. You tell people you're fine when you're not, because showing need feels dangerous. It feels like you're failing at the role you were assigned as a child. To not need anything from anyone. This is called burden avoidance, and research shows it's common in adults who they absorb the message that their needs were too much, that they were supposed to make life easier for adults, not harder. And now they'd rather suffer in silence than risk being perceived as difficult or needy. You're not being strong when you don't ask for help. You're repeating a childhood pattern where asking for help wasn't safe, where your needs were treated as problems instead of valid requirements of being human. Studies show this leads to chronic isolation and untreated mental health issues. You're suffering alone not because you're handling it, but because you learn that suffering alone is what you're supposed to do. Trait 6. You're hypervigilant about others' emotions and needs. You can read a room instantly. You know what everyone needs before they ask. You're constantly scanning for problems to prevent, emotions to manage, needs to meet, because that's what kept you safe as a child. Research shows that parentified children develop exceptional emotional attunement as a survival skill. They had to read adults' emotions to predict behavior, prevent conflict, or provide appropriate support. And that hyper-awareness doesn't turn off in adulthood. You're not just empathetic. You're hypervigilant. You're exhausted from constantly monitoring everyone around you, from managing their emotions, from preventing problems before they happen. It's not kindness. It's a trauma response that won't shut off. Studies show this leads to compassion, fatigue, and emotional burnout. You're using emotional energy on everyone else constantly, and you have none left for yourself. Trait 7. You struggle to access childlike joy and have complicated feelings about childhood itself. You can't play without feeling guilty. You can't be silly without feeling self-conscious. You watch people who had normal childhoods engage in play and fun with an ease you've never felt, and sometimes you feel grief or anger about what was taken from you. Research on stolen childhood shows that adults who are parentified often have mourning responses to their lost childhood that emerge in adulthood. They're grieving something they never had. The innocence, the protection, the freedom to just be a kid. You look at photos of yourself as a child and you see a sad, serious, burdened little person, and you feel rage at the adults who did that to you, who took your childhood and made you responsible for things no child should have been responsible for. Studies show this grief is valid and necessary. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge was lost, and you lost childhood. Not all of it maybe, but significant parts that should have been yours. Here's what all 7 traits reveal. You weren't just forced to grow up too fast. You were forced to become someone you were never supposed to be. And that person, the hyper-responsible, self-sufficient, burden-avoiding, people-pleasing, emotionally vigilant adult child is still running your life. You can't undo what happened. You can't go back and have the childhood you deserved. But you can start recognizing these patterns as trauma responses, not personality traits. You can start questioning whether you have to keep living this way, just because that's all you know. You can learn that you're allowed to need people, that your needs matter, that you can rest without guilt, that you don't have to manage everyone's emotions, that you're allowed to play, that asking for help isn't weakness, that being a burden sometimes is part of being human. This isn't about blame. Your parents might have been doing their best with their own trauma and limitations. But impact matters more than intent. And the impact of growing up too fast is that you're still carrying weight you were never meant to carry. You were a child who had to be an adult. Now you're an adult who never got to be a child. And both of those realities are living in you, creating patterns that serve no one. You deserved better. You still deserve better. And giving yourself permission to need, to rest, to matter, to be cared for, that's not selfishness. That's healing what should never have been broken in the first place. You grew up too fast, and it's not too late to give yourself the childhood permission to finally, just be. Not the caretaker. Not the responsible one. Not the one who handles everything. Just you. Imperfect. Needing. Human. That's what you're still looking for. Permission to be what you never got to be as a child. Someone whose needs matter. Someone who gets to be taken care of. Someone who's allowed to just exist without having to earn it. Give yourself that permission. Finally. It's decades overdue.